Welcome to Marketing Rebels Breaking Business Barriers. You've joined us for a special series called Marketing Momentum for Mental Health. We have Lindsay here today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about herself, why this topic matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Lindsay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Shauna. I'm super excited to be here today, talking about one of my favorite things, mental health.
Mhm.
So,
And it's kind of bigger than that, not just your favorite things. Tell everybody a little bit about kind of what you do and maybe the impact that mental health has on all of that. To just
Oh, golly.
give people some
Okay.
perspective, because this is a big deal.
Yeah. So, a bit about what I do. I'm a business brand. What am I?
Yeah.
I'm a business brand and culture consultant for companies. And ultimately, though, how I became a brand and culture consultant really comes from my background in marketing, in copywriting for development. I ran a copywriting business for years. And over time, that evolved into understanding brand and brand voice and brand values and all that. Clear very quickly when you start to encourage your clients to be honest about what their values are, what they look like. It became very clear very quickly that when a company's brand and messaging is off and misaligned with their culture, then you really have a mentally unhealthy company.
Mhm.
So that's and part of what I do is how do we make sure that we have a mentally well company? And it's not about psychological safety and all of that for me. They're beautiful, amazing experts who I refer out to for those pieces. For the work that I do, it's prior. So how do we make sure that we're building these very healthy, mentally well organizations? And that comes down to the people. And how are we helping support the people within it?
That makes perfect sense. And I mean, it's something that whether you have a bigger company where you're actually looking at these intercommunications within different sectors of your business, or if you have a small company, even if you're a solopreneur, the way you manage the different aspects of how you do business connected to your core values can make a significant difference in how you're showing up for your business and how you can care for yourself and the very many, very real needs that you have as a functioning human being, which does include preserving your mental health, or at least, I mean, sometimes we don't want to preserve it. A lot of times we want to improve it, don't we? So,
well, I mean, mental health is something we do want to preserve. Absolutely. Because I think when we say the words mental health, there's this connotation of negative, bad, depressed, low, lethargic, languishing, all of that when we say mental health. But mental health isn't that. Mental health is positive. It fuels us. It allows us to stay aligned with our values that aren't fluffy marketing statements. It allows us to really understand how do we as an individual show up in our actions so we can bring more purpose and meaning to the work that we do.
right. So it's really the moments when you're talking about improving your mental health, what you're really saying is improving upon your lack of mental health. Because when you are mentally healthy, you're able to perform at a much better rate. You're able to actually execute in a way that leads to the results that you want to get. That makes perfect sense. And so in your experience then, what are you seeing as being that thing, that main hiccup that should signal, hey, that you're not on that path? You may need to start reflecting a little bit more on what's happening within and at the roots to make sure that you're preserving that space of mental acuity. Maybe I'm not sure exactly what else. What's a sub-in word for mental health? Goodness gracious.
Well, so I mean, it's interesting because there's these two different dynamics here. There's the mental health of a company and the mental health of an individual. And so let's talk soul props first. Plain and simple, entrepreneurs, soulpreneurs, they have a higher likelihood of having lower mental health is what we'll say.
Okay.
Simply because there's often a lot on their shoulders, the isolation that can happen, the hearing of the no, the hearing of the no, the hearing of the no, the not hearing it, right? So it can really take like a chisel to your own confidence. And the more you chisel away at that, the lower that you start to feel, because you start to understand scripts of I'm not enough, I am not doing enough, I am never going to achieve. And that's not good as a sole prop. But the
Yeah.
problem that happens a lot of the time is when you are in a depressive cycle. So pause for a moment and so that I give a little bit of context as to this. I myself I myself have depression and anxiety, and what happened when I worked in the big corporate world was when I essentially, for lack of a better word, and it was really at that point that I started to understand, how do we move through depression? How do I keep going forward? What do I do? What are my values? As they were very misaligned with the life I was living at that point. Um, and so what that journey started to tell me was you can pull yourself up with tools, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the end. You're up out of your depression and
Right.
no more, right? No. For many of us, it's a cycle. And it's understanding what happens when we're in the cycle of depression. And for me, as a sole prop, not as a soul, and for me as a person, my depression takes on a very physical form in that I stutter, so I can barely get words out, and I have tinnitus, so I can't really hear anything beyond this loud
Mm.
ringing in my ears.
Yeah. As
How
a fellow tinnitus owner,
it's
oh, yeah,
horrid,
it
right?
is. It's terrible. It's either the ringing, or for me, when the noise around me gets too high, it's like a thrum,
Yeah.
and the ringing sucks, but the thrum hurts.
It hurts. Yeah. Yeah. Same. Absolutely same. And so, how can you communicate with any of your clients
Right.
at that point effectively, especially if you're not going to hit a deadline?
Mm.
And so from that, it really, I started to explore and understand, well, I mean, it's essentially building a communication plan for yourself, knowing who you are as an individual and what you need to do to step yourself out of this depression. And then communicating that with your clients. You don't need to go into the details, but for me, a lot of the time I have deadlines. And when the depressive cycle comes in and I literally cannot even think for 2 minutes because of the cotton fog in the head, um, I have to reach out and say, "Hey, this is what's going on." But I don't just say, "Hey, this is what's going on, and good luck. You'll get me when you get me." It's,
Yeah.
we start to understand who we are on a deeper level, and a lot of that is because of the values work. Now, all I do with my clients when that did happen, it's knock on wood, hasn't happened in a long time, knock on wood, all you really
I've got it.
do, yeah, knock on wood, next best thing, um, is with my clients, I say, "Here's what's happened.
Mm.
I know I'll be able to have a deeper conversation in 3 days, 3 to 4 days.
Right.
Like, here's what's happened. Here's my plan, to get you the information that you need or to hit the deadline because it's now shifted. Uh, do you wanna have a conversation about this in 3 days when there's a little bit more coherence?"
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said, "Yeah, let's have a conversation." They've all said, "No, you go take care of yourself." Because you understand how to pull yourself up and you've demonstrated, "Here's my solution for you." Um
I think that's really cool what you just
Mhm,
said. I had to note it because a lot of times, whether you are clinically diagnosed with some sort of mental health condition,
mhm.
or if you just experience um, a degradation of your mental health based on your circumstances, based on stress, based on internal dialogue, based on
Burnout.
whatever, yeah, right, anything like that, no matter what that is, a lot of times what happens is we wind up getting Actually, hold on. We've lost Lindsay. That's all right. She'll come back. She always does. Let's see if we can make sure we can get back here. Well, a lot of times we'll see when Lindsay comes back because she'll be back soon. She's reliable and lovely. People are afraid to reach out, right? People are afraid to say, I'm struggling. And there are reasons why people are afraid. And I'm sure Lindsay and I can talk about that very soon. But when it comes down to it, what Lindsay just said was that when she reaches out and says, this is my reality right now, and I have a plan in place, that she determined that plan when she was mentally healthy. When she reached out and she said, hey, here she is. She's back. That's all right,
internet.
That's right. We're good. Don't worry about it. What I was just saying, Lindsay, is that like what you said was when somebody's reaching out, when somebody's putting themselves out there, people are often afraid to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you've developed a plan beforehand while you were in a mentally healthy state.
Yeah.
Right. In order to execute that. And people are afraid to reach out because they're afraid of a negative reception. But what you're saying is that you've never really had that. People are always like, hey, it's okay. Now, that's not to say that you won't experience a negative reception of that. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we understand that the majority of times people want what's best for you. People want you to take care. So it's important to communicate that.
They do want what's best for you, and on a selfish level, they want what's best for you because it will improve the work you're doing for them.
Right.
That's not to say I haven't gotten any pushback, but those typically aren't my clients anyways.
That's it.
Right,
And then actually another really interesting point that I was kind of walking towards is just this idea that you don't usually get, it's important to reach out. It's important to let people know what's going on, and because it's both. And I want to bring up a post you made on social media that you make almost every year during the talk.
I'm making more than once a year, but yes, let's talk.
Right. Well, at least once a year, I see it come. So this Let's Talk. So we're talking about how you need to communicate your needs, what's going on. But what's the opposite side, Lindsay?
Listening.
Right.
Unconditional, deep listening with belief, without expectation, just holding space. Because people want to talk. People in our organizations, they want to talk. They want to be supported. They want to know that should something happen in their life, they're not going to be ostracized and stigmatized because of life. And something that 1 in 4 Canadians go through, right? Like 25% of us will absolutely go through this. The other 75% will absolutely know somebody. And so the thing is, if we're encouraging people to talk, the harm can come when we don't listen without judgment.
Right.
The harm happens when we listen and say something that we think is helpful, but ultimately is so damaging to the other person. Yeah.
That can be very hard because then you get to the point where I don't know what to say.
I don't know what to say. I don't know who to trust.
Right. And so, and also though, like for the person who's listening, you've made the space to listen. Sometimes you hesitate to even make that space because what if I do say something stupid? I feel like sometimes the best thing to do is say, I don't know what to say. Your feelings are valid and I'm here for you. And that's just my little tidbit because when you're putting yourself out there, you need to talk. You need to be in a space where you feel safe to listen. And it's up to us to make sure that we curate that space.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that if you don't listen well, shame on you. We're not taught how to listen deeply without and so that then goes to more of that inner work of the listener when we are listening to somebody sharing some very hard, dark truths for them,
Right.
we may get activated and say something. If we are, well, why would you do that? Oh, okay. But because something in us has been triggered, well, that's a moment for us to start to recognize, I need to pause right now and just listen and say, I'm sorry you're going through that. That sucks. I believe you. Or even if you don't believe them, then don't say anything about that, but don't ask a question that poses judgment on them.
Right. Right. And that's
Mhm.
a really important kind of idea to move forward when it comes to, I believe you, that part there.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, even when we go to, I can even give you a really great example of myself when it wasn't this past summer, but the summer before. I pretty much had a summer that sucked. It was just, and I love summer. Like, oh, I love the sunshine. I'm a sunshine witch. I just want to be out there soaking it. I love it. But it was shit because 4 people in my family passed away,
Mhm.
like consecutively. I got a really great client and then lost them. Due to no fault of my own.
Mhm. Mhm.
PS.
Mhm.
um, but it was just a blow, and there were many other little things that just kept going, 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 and it was just horrible. So I wound up going to, and I wound up developing physiological symptoms
Yeah.
from the stress. And so what they manifested as were allergies, which is what my doctor says. They're just allergies. But I don't have allergies. I do not have, I've grown up outside. I lived in Northern Ontario. I was always under the trees. I was always in the fields, and I don't have allergies. And he says, no, they can develop sometimes. It's fine. You'll be okay. Here's like a basket full of medicine for your
Yeah.
allergies. Oh my gosh. Now, listen, I did take like the medicine that helped my head because my head felt horrible. But in the end, I believe that this was a stress response and I was going through an episode and I
Mhm.
needed more support. And I did articulate this. But no, I got swept under the rug, swept under the rug. I wasn't believed.
Mm.
And this is huge. This
Mhm.
happens all the time for more than just a moment of my mental health suffering, for people who have consistent chronic mental health conditions who are not being heard. And this is a problem, especially when you're trying to run a business to make your life better on top of
Mhm.
that.
Yep. And well, so there's so much there. I mean, let's talk a little bit about accessibility of support, because at the end of the day, our mental health is not the responsibility of our employer. It is not the responsibility of our leader. It is not the responsibility of our clients. It is our responsibility. And how it's our responsibility, though, really it relies a lot on accessibility.
Right.
And I so gosh darn fortunate in that I am a fairly slender-ish, 5'9" tall female who's white in Canada,
Reasonably privileged.
reasonably privileged. And I had a leader who believed me and encouraged me to go and get help. And I had a doctor who believed me. In fact, she was able to, like, when I started describing what was happening, not sleeping very well, my stomach's, and she's like, are you not, like, are you throwing up your food? And that just opened the door to her putting my name in for access to the eating disorder clinic, all of these things, right? And I was at a large corporation at the time that also had an EAP program. So I had all this access and belief. And therefore, I didn't really feel any stigma. I felt stigma before I got help. And that was a decade of purging everything I ate. It was a decade of a lot of self-hate. That was a decade I did have to go through, I think, in order to really understand and connect and identify what are values. And it leads me into the work that I'm doing now to really make sure that leaders are so proud of who they are, and they can show up and they can lead in their truest fashion and create teams and have teams that are believed and support one another and blah, blah, blah. Not everybody has that though. And I think that is a massive issue that we need to talk about even today. And I know that part of the reason, like, so I started getting help back in 2011. I'm still with my doctor today. And she's very good at listening, and she keeps an eye on the drugs that I have, because I also do take antidepressants in addition to a lot of other things.
Mm.
But a friend of mine that same year, when I started talking about this is what I'm going through, all of that, she thought, oh, Lindsay has depression. Lindsay does these things, but she smiles all the time.
Right.
Maybe I should go and talk to somebody. And she did. And she went to her doctor, and her doctor didn't believe her. And her doctor just said, here's some pills, see me in 6 months. So, and then even with my husband's journey, it's been interesting to see that the difference and so my friend, tall, white female, not slender.
Right.
My husband, white male, trades. These two individuals have and had horrid experiences with their family doctors because there was no belief. They had horrible experiences with their employers because there was no belief and bullying. And so I think this goes way beyond marketing and mental health. Like, it goes to how are we helping our people take responsibility for their mental health?
Yes, because you can only take so much responsibility if you're not given the opportunity to actually do the things that you need to do to better yourself. And I mean, I know you say it goes beyond marketing, and you're correct. And I believe that you're never not marketing. And so in this
Fair.
circumstance, when we're advocating, when we're saying there's a problem, when our privileged community is unable to access the healthcare that they need, because it is healthcare, mental health, you're not connecting these things. When
Mental
they
health
can't
is health.
access,
Right.
right, that's it.
Period.
I mean, when you can't access that, how can you bring your best self back into the community? Because it's a circle. How can you do that as an employee of a corporation, as an individual functioning within our community, and as an entrepreneur, who's trying to do their best for themselves, for their family, and then of course improving the community tenfold, because a successful entrepreneur makes the entire community thrive.
Yeah.
And so if you're not providing support for that person because of stigma, lack of accessibility, innumerable other things, then there's a problem. And we need to continue to market ourselves in a way that includes listening and safe spaces to communicate, to talk.
Well, and you said something too, is like when privileged people can't get access. Well, I mean, that just goes to, and if you don't have privilege.
That's my point. That's exactly it.
Like,
I couldn't imagine. And
Yeah.
this is why Marketing Rebels exists. This is why we're subsecting that, of course, into marketing momentum for mental health, because there are so many intersectionalities that need to be addressed within this conversation that, like, it bothers me. And this is where I think, where are my skill sets? And how can I contribute to a better space using those?
Yes.
Here we are. This is the conversation I can start. And more ideas come every single time we open that door.
Well, and what I love, so that idea of what are my skills and how can I use this to move things forward or whatnot. I think I'm freaking hilarious. I'm not. But
if anybody needs to know, this has been a heavy-weighted conversation.
This has been a heavy-weighted
it is not always that way. In fact, I would argue like 80% of the time, at least, it is not that way. We like to have fun. We like to approach these things from a different point of view that many people will, because we have fun senses of humor that take things out of proportion sometimes. But it's good. And I will advocate Lindsay's funny. No, but don't listen to what she says. No, she's funny.
Well, but that's the thing, is so one of the things that I really had to do when I was first depressed, diagnosed with depression, is what I should say,
Yeah.
was I actually really had to tap into my humor. And I would go and I would very actively look for very mundane things that had humor in them, and I'd start to write some stories about them. And that eventually came to making more puns, which I love, and which then over time, and it all came down to this like I'm also fairly crass. I'm hilarious and crass. And there was this moment where I had a fantastic poop.
Beauty.
Fantastic poop.
Okay. And
There
listen, if anybody's out there going, oh my God, do not tell me that you haven't had a fantastic poop. Okay. Because
you
if
know
you
that
haven't,
when
you
you're
need to go
just
talk to your osteopath and you need to get something going. Because like, let's be
it's
real.
true. But it was this moment of there's the struggle, there's the struggle, there's the struggle, and you get through it, and then you lean back and you're just like, life is good.
It's like
I
giving
got
birth,
this.
just to let everybody know. That's exactly what giving birth is like.
Oh, well, I've given birth a lot then. But but what that did, it opened my mind to understanding depression and constipation are very similar because I started to see these parallels between what was going on with depression in my head and being constipated and what was going on in my gut.
Right.
Now, and then from there, it just kind of all started to flow into poop puns and how do you get when your brain is really clogged, how do you get mental prune juice? Because one thing for constipation is to eat some prunes.
It's
So
true.
what do you do with your brain? What's that prune juice? How do you move? And so it opened this whole conversation. Number one, it helped my husband understand what depression was because he did not have any experience with it. He did not believe in it at the time. But now all of a sudden, I'm saying, I'm not sad. I'm depressed. Here's what it's like. It's like not being able to poop. And he got it. Right? Based on, like, the table I drew of, like,
Yeah.
and here's the parallels, right? And he understood it. And so it was this to open the conversation, the dialogue around what is depression? What is anxiety? What are these things that we can do to shed some light on these very hard topics without making light of them, but having a bigger conversation where people don't shut down because of the stigma.
Right. Because humor sets everyone at ease. Because you're
Good
able to
humor.
then good humor. That's true. That's a very good point. But good, it's true though. Like if you've got good humor, it'll set you at ease and be more able to address topics that are a little scary. And
Mhm.
I find that a lot of times, I have these conversations with people, colleagues and friends in my world. And as a pretty stereotypical Canadian, I do a lot of like self-depreciating jokes, and that frequently sets people at ease and makes them go, "Oh, right, you're not perfect. I'm allowed to be imperfect too."
The one thing though, and I've I didn't demonstrate it on this show, but the one thing is self-deprecation humor can be very harmful to your own mental health because we're still living in that script of less than.
Right.
So that is something that we do need to also
So
acknowledge.
proceed with caution.
Proceed with caution, yeah.
Right.
Um, be and I'll be honest, you're actually one of the people who taught me about that, when I was sharing about, some feedback of a presentation I said, and the feedback was, "This person woke me the F up."
Yeah.
And I was joking like, "Oh, it's probably because it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I stood up and talked and made them laugh." And of course, they woke up, they were sleeping. But it was you who's just like, "No, you do not do this self-deprecating stuff because this stuff works." Just like show that you need to own your awesome. And
Yeah.
so we do need to walk this fine line of self-deprecation humor, particularly if we are prone to uh more negative mental health,
Mm.
unhealthy mental status, I guess.
Yeah.
um
I think
Even if it's not diagnosed depression or anything,
that's
we do need
that's
to be
right.
careful with
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
Now, if I say stereotypical Canadian self-deprecation, I'm thinking more along the lines of like, the Olympics that were held out the West Coast, and how like most of the time the Olympics are kind of formal and they're very serious about the country, and yet we, of course, now everyone listening, Lindsay is also Canadian. We had like giant blown up beavers and mounties like friggin' marching around. Like I It was comical. And we were just making fun of ourselves as Canadians, being like, look at us with our beer and hockey, eh? But, I mean, it's
And
just,
our blow-up dolls.
and our blow up dolls, and just like, yeah, oh, it's fine. We get snowed in every once in a while. Like, it's lonely. It's
These conversations going off the rails. Let's bring it back.
but this is my point. Like, this is self depreciating in such that I am not depreciating myself.
Yes,
And
yes.
this is where the proceed with caution comes up. I'm not going to tell, like, and I very much did say this to Lindsay. Do not say that you bored them to death, because 100% you didn't. You had them so riveted that they were able to make a significant change in the way they were thinking about their reality.
Mhm,
That's huge.
mhm,
So you see the difference.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, I just wanted to put that out there because
But it's true.
it's
And
so easy.
here's Lindsay
It's
putting it
so
out there, and me
easy.
just, I'm going to exemplify it. The way it goes. It's just the way it goes. Oh no, that's a really good point, though. And then so you explored that, you changed people's minds about their perception of depression using poop puns.
Mhm.
And then what?
Well, I don't know. Well, now I present on that. What does that like, how do you actually do things when you're in these moments?
Mhm.
How do you do things? Right? Like, obviously, it's a lot of self-awareness. With the depression constipation talk, I did make a book of it. And it's called Depression Constipation: How Pooping Saved My Sanity and Other Stories. You can find that on Amazon. But with that, it really also captures, well, what is this parallel? How can we start to explain what depression is, or welcome people who might be frightened of that word into the conversation? Um, and in the book as well, I then also have those, what were those stories that I really had to cultivate and find the humor in the world when all that I saw was bleak, and how did I bring color back into my world? And then what can you do? What are some tools? It is not professional help, this book. This is really an opening to a conversation that for understanding.
Right. Which
Yeah.
is what we're trying to do here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, it's a really important space to create,
Yeah.
because there's no right answer.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really important, I keep on saying important, like everything's important, but I'm really I'm one of those rose-colored glasses girls, and I'm going to tell you, oh, it's so beautiful. Look at the little grass poking up between the cracks in the pavement. I'm that person. So it's challenging for me to just say, no, that's the best thing, because it's so multifaceted. And
It's
so,
well, it's so multifaceted, and I think that's one thing that is, awesome about what you're doing with this marketing for mental health. Marketing for mental health and all the
I
different,
said it a lot. I've got it.
you've got this. The all the different conversations that you're having and the different
Mhm.
perspectives that you're having, um, because they are all important, depending upon who's listening at that moment.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
And so when you're an entrepreneur in
Mhm.
particular, because the majority of the people listening today will be entrepreneurs. Not that this does not help people over and above that.
Mhm.
When we consider showing up for our business, and remember, we are never not marketing. Whether you are showing up for your business behind the scenes with a hoodie on and you're just typing away or whatever, or whether you're showing up on a podcast and you're making the best impression that you can while being true to yourself, taking care of your mental health
Mhm.
can present itself as a challenge, but it is absolutely a priority that you should have. And we
Mhm.
don't like shooting all over people, but in this context, I believe that it's important. So if somebody's in that space, Lindsay, what are you telling them?
Go back to your values. If you don't know what your values are, let's start exploring. Um, what happens so many times is that we have models, we have models of that, we have values modeled for us growing up, modeled for us in out in the world, and unless we actually take the time to ask ourselves, what is it that I value? We can fall into a rhythm that's not ours, a rhythm that is completely against the grain of who we are internally. And that's what I done. That's what happened with me. That's what happens with a lot of people. And so if you're in this moment of WTF, I can't get out of bed, or I'm just feeling completely isolated in what I'm doing, and I'm feeling heavier on the inside than normal, or there's just fog in the head. Ask yourself, what are your values? And if you don't know, that is an indication to start asking more questions. What are things that light you up when you're active, when you're doing something? What are those things?
Mm.
Who lights you up on the inside, or who makes you feel like you are constantly in competition? When nobody else is around and you don't have to put on any airs, what is it that actually matters to you? If you were attached to a lie detector test and they worked 1,000% of the time, sure,
I got it. We got it.
sure. And you had to answer what's really important to you. What would you say so you can pass that lie detector test? And so there's a whole exploration of to how can you get to your values, but go back to your values, because they are those underlying beliefs upon which you will take action. And when you can start to move yourself forward in action, no matter what that is, no matter if it's even small. For me, on those days, I give myself 2 small goals: shower and go outside for 5 minutes. What are those small little things that you can do that are attached to your values? And I know what those actions are attached to my core values for. So that's one of the biggest things I can say is go back to your values.
Right.
Where are you missing? Where are you misaligned?
And this actually goes full circle to what we were talking about right at the beginning when you were saying that it's not just the core values of a business.
Mhm.
Fancy words on a paper, the proverbial kitten poster on a wall. We're talking about the things that actually matter,
Mhm.
and the deep in the root of your stomach matter. The things that when something happens that goes against that, your insides become inflamed because
Mhm.
and you can feel it instinctively. That's
Mhm.
rubbing against a value.
Mhm.
And then what I'm hearing from you is, what are the actions that you're taking to nurture those values?
Yeah. So, for instance, as I was saying, like way back in 2011, I started to write these stories. That action is tied to my humor value. It's also tied to my creativity value, which is my number one core personal value. And those were actions I could do. Now, the stories, they didn't, some of them are freaking hilarious. There are some that didn't make it in there, but it was the action of the doing and the being very intentional of, I'm going out of the house for 5 minutes. What am I going to be looking for?
Mm.
I'm going to be looking for funny moments. And so it's that action that is connected to the value that allows you to start moving forward and feeling good about those actions and feeling good about what's out there and the energy that you're then going to be like putting out there and how you're showing up. Yeah.
Right. And that's just throughout everything. I think in another conversation I mentioned the whole ski trip. If you look for the trees, you're going to hit the trees. If you look
Yeah.
for the gaps, then you'll make it through. And
Mhm.
that's the reality here too. It's really, um, we say mental health. It's housed in your mentality, your cognizance, and how you can take control of that, at least to some extent, to get you to a place where you're able to either ask for help or
Mhm.
create systems and use tools that support you in that space, and
Mhm.
get you through it. But in the end, you really need to prioritize yourself. Now,
Mhm.
that said, I know that's and it can feel very challenging, and there are going to be a lot of conversations here where we talk about examples of how we do that and different perspectives, and some of the, like I was saying, the integration of a variety of different complications that can arise. We're going to be talking about that. But for the time being, Lindsay, I wanted to invite you to share some final thoughts about, I know, the wide range of topics that we've covered today. And then, of course, let people know how they can reach out to you, because I strongly recommend that you all do.
Whoa.
Ah.
Final thoughts. um, yes, final thoughts. I mean, for me, it all goes back to values. And when we can understand what our values are, we can start to take action. When we understand what our values are, we can listen more deeply because we understand those moments when we feel like, ugh. And that simply means that one of our personal values has been rubbed up against. And it has nothing to do with that person. And when we understand that, we can just give them space to be and go and explore our own later. Go back to your values. Period. Like that's really it. Values, baby.
It feels simple. It feels simple. Conceptually, it is simple.
Mm-hmm.
The action of unearthing these things can be complicated. And I'll be the first to wave Lindsay's flag and say, if you want to see at least some of the ways that you started unearthing yours, maybe take a dive into the book.
A deep dive. Bring Kleenex.
Bring
Sorry. Yeah. So again, you can find the book, Depression, Constipation, How Pooping Saved My Sanity and Other Stories on Amazon.
What does it look like, Lindsay?
Pardon?
What does it look like?
Oh, it looks like this. This is the book, and you're in the stall, clearing your mind.
Clearing your mind. Yes.
And you can find me on LinkedIn, or even go to my website at brpconsulting.ca.
It even comes with a jingle.
I guess, yeah.
Beauty. Today it does.
Today it does, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And to all of you, I strongly recommend you go and check out that book, connect with Lindsay, and start the conversation, because she is one of the best listeners who I know. That said, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share with your friends, because this conversation needs to be had all over, and there are more coming. So join in, comment. Like I say, this is the conversation that you want to be a part of. We'll catch you on the flip side.